Until the hippies and rock and roll became a fact of Finnish life, drugs were under the radar in the country's culture, and they were only made illegal in 1972. Marijuana was lumped with cocaine, heroin, and other hard drugs. Today mention marijuana to many people in Finland, and they think crime, addiction, or worse. We talked to Dr. Timo Seppälä at the National Board of Health to find out the government's position on cannabis.
Marihuana on Suomessa luokiteltu huumausaineeksi ja myös siten, että sen käyttö on rangaistavaa. Suomessa on keskusteltu myöskin tietysti kannabiksen laillistamisesta, kuten muuallakin maailmassa, mutta toistaiseksi ei ole lähdetty sille linjalle, että se olisi laillistettu kokonaan, mutta tiettyihin sairauksiin on mahdollisuus saada lääkeviranomaisilta erivapaus käyttää joitain marihuana-johdannaisia esimerkiksi sairauksien hoitoon.
We also talked to a patient with diabetes who has decided to grow his own marijuana.
Mä oon sairastanut semmoisen 45 vuotta sokeritautia ja siitä on seurannut aika pahoja neuropaattisia kipuja. Ja siksi mä oon etsinyt siihen lääkityksestä apua, mutta kun ei tahdo oikein löytyä ja mä kuulin kannabiksesta, niin nyt mä oon sitten ajatellut testata sitä.
To get another perspective, our film team went to California, where I lived before I moved to Finland. There, medical marijuana has been legal for everyone with a doctor's prescription since 1996. And an election was coming up with a proposition on the ballot that would make possession of small amounts of pot legal for recreational use. If passed, marijuana would not only be legal, but taxed and regulated. We wanted to find out how their system worked and be on the spot when the votes came in. We chose Oakland as our base, where Oaksterdam University is located. It's a trade school founded in 2007 that will teach you everything you ever want or need to know about marijuana.
Well, the name Oaksterdam came from bringing Oakland with Amsterdam. We were looking for the Amsterdam coffee shop feel here in downtown Oakland, California. And when Richard decided to start Oaksterdam University, he borrowed the logo from one of the most famous universities in America. So it might look a little familiar to you.
Richard Lee, the founder, wanted to get more people interested in the cause, so he passed the word around that they were starting a cannabis college, and the phone lines went ballistic.
Richard Lee was trying to move the issue forward here in Oakland and was trying to figure out how to get people to show up to the city council meetings. He thought, well, the one thing that everybody wants to know from him is how to grow cannabis. So as kind of a joke or a teaser, he thought, well, maybe as a marketing ploy to get people to show up to the meetings, I can offer them to learn how to grow. But first, we have to teach you politics, history, and legal. And it was an amazing trade-off, because what happened was once folks understood the political climate of where we are, they were now educated to walk into the city council meetings and talk about how to take the next step. So it was kind of a quid pro quo.
The school has been good for tourism. Students come from all over the US and other countries. I think I was the first from Finland. One of the things that impressed me about Oaksterdam was the organization. This was not a bunch of hippy-dippies, even if the school did start as a joke. The staff, some paid, some volunteers, is serious, knowledgeable, and polite. The revenue is $7 million a year, all taxable. The first class met in what is now the bike shop.
After a point, we just kept scheduling intermittently, thinking that the phone would stop ringing, but it started ringing more, and then we needed another line, and then we needed a bigger building. We started teaching just a few months later down in Los Angeles and saw a tremendous response from both Northern and Southern California. The truth of the matter is most folks want to do it right. They want to be part of the solution. And if only someone out there would teach them how to be safe and responsible under California law, and how to grow good quality medicine for themselves or their loved ones, that's exactly how they're going to do it.
Today, Oaksterdam has 5 campuses and 15,000 graduates. Before the guys arrived, I took the 2-day introduction course at Oaksterdam. Included in the price was a big fat notebook crammed with information, and a surprise inclusion was a copy of the Constitution of the United States. Chris Conlon and Mickey Norris have been longtime activists for the legalization of marijuana, and they publish a newspaper called the West Coast Weed. Chris also works as an expert witness for the defense.
What my job is to do is to analyze the prosecution's case and come in and try to level the playing field so that the defense has the same ability to argue its case as to what the prosecution has.
So they're often charged, let's say they have 60 plants, they'll say they're charged with 60 pounds, where Chris will go in and look at this little measly garden that they raided, and we'll weigh it and look at it and come up with another calculation to give them more of a defense.
Yeah,
so
just for one example, a normal indoor plant might put out 28 grams, and the police are going to say every plant puts out 454 grams, which is a pound. But if no one goes in there and says it only weighs 20 grams, then they just say, well, it weighed 454 grams.
Mä kävin Amsterdamissa ostamassa ton, kun kuulin, että niitä sieltä saa helposti kaupungilta ostettua kukkokaupasta. Niin kuin muutkin tuliaiset, pistin sen kassiin ja lensin takaisin. Mä ajattelin, että jos joku kysyy, mä sanon, että se on starterikitti, että tämmöisen ostin, kun kadulla myytiin. Se kiinni jäämisriski on aika pieni, ja jos mä jään kiinni, niin mä voin osoittaa sen, että mihin mä sitä käytän ja miksi mä sitä käytän. Kai mut sit tuomitaan, mutta aika monesta muustakin asiasta saa vaan soosoota. Mä jotenkin luotan naivisti siihen, että mä saan sit vähän soosoota. No mä oon netistä katsellut kasvatusohjeita, niin tähän sieltä löytyy pilvin pimein. Saa nähdä, en mä mikään viherpeukalo ole, että mielenkiintoista nähdä, saanko mä mitään kasvamaan.
The second day of the course concentrated on how to cultivate cannabis. Hassan McCauley showed us some of the different varieties in the school's nursery.
It's called cannabis. Cannabis, yes, cannabis. Well, the first one, there's actually a male and female plant, which are different. Both have different characteristics. Also, they grow annually, so it can reach full maturity in a year if you do it outdoors, or you can actually, if you control the environment and the light, you can actually have it grow within 3 months.
Well, basically a fast-growing weed. To get the highest yield, we learn, takes tender, loving, constant care and a lot of special equipment. One grower said, if you know how to treat a woman, you'll know how to grow marijuana.
Grows very fast. Yeah, it grows very fast, and that's one of the reasons why industrial hemp will be good for the economy and for the country, because instead of having 1 acre of trees that you normally will cut down and then it'll take 20 years to regrow, if you had that same acreage, you can cut down the plants. You can have about 4 times as more plants planted than regular lumber would, and after 1 year, you can grow it right back again. So you don't have to keep cutting more and more forests. You can just keep planting male plants. The one right here is Trainwreck. So it's a sativa. It's an old strand, pretty famous, high yielder. Yeah, and it has a very distinct smell to it. You know, right now you can't smell it because it's still in its vegetative state. But after it goes into its flowering cycle and you smell the buds, you'll know Trainwreck when you smell it.
Richard Lee and his friend Jeff Jones were responsible for getting Proposition 19 on the November ballot. Oaksterdam University donated $1,400,000 to the effort. Others donated as well, including the financier and supporter George Soros. Proposition 19 was such a media event that we weren't the only ones filming at the campaign office.
Well, Proposition 19 is an effort to make cannabis legal across the state of California. It would allow citizens over the age of 21 to have an ounce or less on their person anywhere in the state, allow citizens to have a 5x5 growing area, that's 25 square feet, on their own property, only 1 per property. In cases where cities and counties wanted to dictate it, they could have commercial grows and commercial selling for recreational use as opposed to simply for medicinal use. Well, if Proposition 19 passes, we will have the State Board of Equalization has estimated 60 to 110,000 new jobs $1.4 billion in revenue just from excise taxes on cannabis products. And that's not even including the hemp industry, which we would have a 50-state monopoly on, being the only state that would be legal to produce hemp. And that estimate also isn't including all the income taxes that would be paid on all these 60 to 110,000 new jobs, plus all the jobs from the hemp industry, the tourism that would be arising. The estimate's in the billions that California could benefit, as well as all the millions of dollars we'd save on not having to prosecute people for marijuana crimes.
In 1930, the records on marijuana in the Washington office of the Narcotics Division scarcely filled a small folder like this. Today, they fill cabinets. All these devoted to marijuana records.
How one of the most useful plants on the planet became criminalized is a twisty, murky, crooked path that's hard to follow. One thing is certain, until the early 1900s, cannabis was ubiquitous and widely used for many things, including medicine. When the early settlers came to America, they were obliged to grow hemp.
But do you realize that marijuana is not like other forms of dope? You see, it grows wild in almost every state in the Union.
In the U.S., western states began to ban it when they had trouble with Mexicans who crossed the border and brought cannabis with them. The authorities called it loco weed. The Mexicans called it marijuana. How marijuana got to be the universally used word for cannabis is obscure. Spanish for Mary Jane, no one can say for sure why it stuck. But today it's one of the most recognizable words in the English-speaking world. Selwa Ibrahim is Richard's executive assistant. She arranges interviews and media contacts. Every month, she gives a tour of Oaksterdam's campus.
Welcome to Oaksterdam. My name is Salwa, and I'll be touring you today. We're at our first stop here at the Bulldog Coffee Shop. The Bulldog Coffee Shop is named after the Dutch coffee shop. So right now, it serves as just a regular coffee shop, and people are able to come here and enjoy a nice cup of joe. Come on in. And this is the Bulldog Coffee Shop. And you can get coffee here. So the Patient ID Center is where you can get all your commercial grade equipment. You can get high-end vaporizers as well as tumblers and hash makers. This is called a grow tent. So you're able to grow indoors inside this tent, and this is a 4x4. And under Proposition 19, anybody 21 years of age and up will be able to grow a 5x5. So it's just a little bit bigger than this tent. And you have your incense and all these different clothing that's made out of hemp and like hemp twine and hemp seeds, as well as your tumblers, trimmers, and your hash makers. And then over here we have vaporizers, as well as water pipes and little handheld pipes as well.
What are the vaporizers?
This is a vaporizer. Because what it does is that it takes the cannabis and heats it up to a level where the THC then becomes vapor. And so there's really no harmful effects on your lungs. So what happens is in the state of California, a doctor writes you a recommendation for cannabis. And so after you receive your recommendation, you take it here to the Patient ID Center and they give you a state-issued ID card. And what that does is that allows you to go into different dispensaries, but more importantly, if you get pulled over by authorities, they then have to give you your medicine back and you're able to go on your way without any hassle. And so back here operates similar to the California DMV, where your recommendation gets verified. They then issue you a card after you get your picture taken. Right now we're approaching the Oaksterdam Glassworks, and Oaksterdam Glassworks is really sort of an elective course that's available to students. It allows students to come in and learn how to blow their own pipes, and so this is our glass blower currently. He's our instructor, John Simpson, and he offers a course in glass blowing, and really you can pretty much blow anything from Christmas ornaments to personal pipes. And this is actually the very first home of Oaksterdam University.
This is where the first students came.
This is where the first students came. It was very small because we really didn't know, how large of an institution Oaksterdam University was going to become. So we just kind of cleared the bikes out and made some room and then developed a curriculum, and now Oaksterdam University is what it is today. But I remember when Richard first had the idea to start this class, and I remember looking at him being like, "You're crazy, good luck with that." But if you look right there, Become a Freedom Fighter, that was the first ad that was run. Earn a living while ending cannabis prohibition. So right now we're on our way to the gift shop.
Good, I want to buy some gifts.
And so now we're at the Oaksterdam gift shop. And this is where you could come in and buy your Oaksterdam University textbooks, as well as any sort of gift that you care to purchase for a loved one. So yeah, we have everything from the university's textbooks, as well as cookbooks, a chess set. We have hand-blown pieces that were blown at the gift shop, or I'm sorry, the glass blowing shop. And then we have DVDs, as well as baking trays and ice cube trays and hats. We have golf balls. We have yo-yos. There's really pretty much everything here.
The neighborhood has changed. 15 years ago, when I was in Oakland for a film festival, I didn't venture more than 2 blocks from the Marriott Hotel in the center. This time, I felt safer, more relaxed, and walked all over the place. Richard believes mom-and-pop stores are good for a neighborhood.
Well, we've seen a lot of the empty storefronts be filled in with businesses, and not just cannabis businesses, but other businesses, little clothing boutiques and things like that, that benefit from the traffic we create. We bring in a lot of, hundreds of visitors to the area every day, and so a lot of those people stop and shop at the other businesses. We've seen the parking get really tight. When we first opened up down here, we had to use the parking garages because there was plenty of parking on the street. Now we have to park in the parking garages all the time.
Oaksterdam also donated $100,000 to renovate the derelict Art Deco Fox Theater nearby, which has become a school for the performing arts and a place for special events.
We've tried hard to be a part of the community. We're the #2 donor to the revitalization of the Fox Theater, which was just reopened last year after being closed for 50 years. And we have a plaque in the sidewalk next to Bank of America, the #1 donor, and so we're proud of that.
The Paramount, another old movie house that today is used for live performances, is where the city's symphony orchestra performs.
I've always seen Oaksterdam as creating an area for lots of businesses to thrive, much like Amsterdam has hundreds of little coffee shops instead of one big Walmart. The cannabis industry is a legitimate business, a legitimate industry, just like winemaking or brewing beer, and that it should be taken seriously and seen as a industry that creates jobs and pays taxes.
By 1937, almost all the states had laws on the books regarding cannabis. Then the Federal Marijuana Tax Act was passed. It didn't prohibit pot, but required everyone who used it or was involved in the production of hemp to purchase a tax stamp for a nominal fee of about $1. Failure to comply resulted in a $2,000 fine and a 5-year jail sentence. The American Medical Association opposed the law.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness isn't qualified to express opinions upon the effect of narcotics. Sustained.
A year later, Reefer Madness came out. The movie was filmed by a church group. The title was Tell Your Children. It was meant to scare parents into taking action against marijuana.
Here is an example. 16 years old and a marijuana addict. Under the influence of the drug, he killed his entire family with an axe.
A film director saw the lurid possibilities. He bought the rights, renamed it, and recut it for distribution on the exploitation circuit. Nowadays, Reefer Madness is an underground cult classic among pot users.
On selvää, että marihuanaa ja kannabistahan on tutkittu niin kuin väärinkäytettynä aineena vaikka kuinka paljon, mutta tutkimuksia on suhteellisen vähän sen kliinisestä käytöstä. Viime vuosina on kuitenkin opittu varsin hyvin selvittämään erilaisia biologisia tapahtumia, mitä tapahtuu silloin, kun käytetään kannabisvalmisteita. Ja nämä ovat tavallaan antaneet mahdollisuuden siihen, että myös kannabiksessa on huomattu olevan paljon potentiaalista terveydellistä hyötyä. Ja on mahdollista, että erilaisia kannabisvalmisteita tulee tulevaisuudessa enemmän käyttöön.
Näihin neuropaattisiin kipuihin ei oikein nuo perinteiset lääkkeet hyvin auta. Sitten kun pitää jollain saada oloa parannettua, niin sitten oikeastaan niin kuin alkoholin ja lääkkeiden sekakäyttö on semmoinen ainoa asia, millä saa itsensä turrutettua. Sekään ei ole, tai mä en usko, että se on pitkällä tähtäimellä järkevää ja siksi mä haluan kokeilla jotain muuta.
Jos ajatellaan marihuanan kipua poistavia vaikutuksia, niin ne ovat siinä mielessä mielenkiintoisia, että monissa kovissa kivuissa ovat ne sitten joitain selkäleikkauksen jälkeisiä kipuja tai sitten vaikka syöpäkipuja ja muita tällaisia, niin aina esimerkiksi voimakkaat opiaatitkaan eivät niihin auta. Ja itse asiassa niin marihuanalla on todettu synergistinen eli myönteinen yhteisvaikutus opiaattien kanssa joihinkin voimakkaisiin kiputiloihin, eli se saattaa olla hyvinkin hyödyllistä. On kuitenkin muistettava, että tutkimuksia kannabiksen pitkäaikaisvaikutuksista lääkekäytössä on edelleenkin varsin vähän, ja nämä olisi tietysti hyvä tietää ensin, ennen kuin ruvetaan laajamittaisesti käyttämään sitä vaikkapa erilaiseen kivunhoitoon.
A doctor I met in Oxford, England, was visiting her friend, a neurologist who lives near San Francisco. We got to talk to them together.
I think marijuana ought to be treated like alcohol in terms of how it's approached on a social availability for anyone who wants to use it. From a medical perspective, it should be treated like any other drug. Evidence-based use of a medicine treated like every other medicine. And that does not involve going to social clubs and smoking your medicine with your friends.
Any drug that has a high associated with it, even the prescribed drugs like benzodiazepines and codeine and the opiates, there's a huge problem in medicine with people trying to get more of the drugs, even so they're kind of all legal.
I mean, every drug has side effects, so there's no drug that doesn't have a potential consequence to it. And that includes aspirin, which can give you a gastrointestinal bleed and kill you.
In my opinion, it has to come back to safety. I did psychiatry. I seen it with my own eyes that the only thing that made a couple of patients become frankly psychotic and out of touch with reality was smoking cannabis, but it was street cannabis, so who knows what else was in it. If you have any family history risk of psychotic mental health problems, you really shouldn't smoke dope.
The harm that I have seen come to friends because of drunk driving, the patients I have seen who have been ill because of alcohol withdrawal, and the traumas that I've seen in the emergency room where alcohol was a part of the fight or the accident are many. The number of people that I have seen harmed through my friends or through my work from the use of marijuana in such a dramatic way, none. Not to mention the fact that, you know, if it's legal, then we can regulate it, we can tax it, and it's no longer, the supply chain is no longer in the hand of criminals.
The benefits of cannabis as a medication, if not yet mainstream, are beginning to be recognized. Recently, the National Health Service in Great Britain started prescribing Sativex to certain patients with multiple sclerosis. And in Finland, 12 people have been given permits by the National Board of Health to use a marijuana-based medication. Leatrice Chang is a doctor with a family practice in Oakland.
In California, there are medicinal pot users, and I certainly have recommended some of my patients who have chronic pain, certain depressions and insomnia also lend themselves well to medicinal pot. I myself don't have a license to prescribe. The license that the DEA issues to physicians has cannabis or THC derivative as a class 1 substance, which under the current guidelines is considered experimental only.
You can't just walk into the Harborside Medical Center. 2 men at the gate check IDs and doctor's prescriptions, or a license, good for a year, that the city issues after you get a prescription. And it's not easy to get into film either. We got a call from our contact about 2 hours in advance. She said Brazilian TV had just canceled and they could fit us in, and to be prepared because Steve D'Angelo, the executive director, didn't appreciate stupid questions.
Well, we wanted to create an environment where patients would be able to feel that what they were doing was completely normal, that it was respectable, that there was nothing wrong with it. Many patients, because they've had to acquire their medicine in the illegal market previously and hide their medicine use from their employers and their neighbors, feel some shame and some stigma. And we wanted to create an environment where people could just feel that this was normal, that it was a respectable part of their everyday lives. When we first came into Harborside, that big, beautiful room that you see out front actually was a windowless room. There was a wall running along one of the sides of the room that blocked off all of the windows. And when Yolanda, my designer, walked into that room and she took a look at that wall, she said, "That wall is going to have to come down." And I looked at her and I was like, "But if we take that wall down, then there's going to be windows and people outside will be able to look in the windows and see what's going on in here." And she said, "Yes, and the sunlight will be able to come inside and it'll turn this room into a beautiful light-filled space that people will enjoy being in." And I thought about it for a little while. I said, okay, am I ashamed of what I'm doing? No. Is what I'm doing illegal? No. Then why hide? And I said, okay, take down the wall, out of the shadows, into the light. And that actually became the motto of Harborside Health Center, out of the shadows into the light.
The different types of medical marijuana are displayed in glass cases like an upscale bakery. All the products are labeled and tested for purity.
We test everything for safety, for mold and pathogens, but we also test for actual percentages of THC. And we also test for CBD, which is a real interesting other compound that goes into cannabis. It doesn't give you so much of a psychoactive effect, but it's really good for pain relief and anti-inflammation. These are smokables, in a pipe, or you could roll it into a joint, or which this is one would be much more for like daytime use. Also got a little pain relief, but more energy, more of an up kind of a feel, good for depression, that kind of thing. These are tinctures. They steep the cannabis in a different type of media, alcohol or vegetable glycerin. And you could put it in tea or put it under your tongue. It's for people that don't want to smoke, people with like bronchitis, like lung issues, stuff like that.
We sold $21 million worth of cannabis last year. We have 60,000 patients in our collective and see 600 to 800 patients per day. But we are also a nonprofit community service organization. That means that any net retained earnings I have after we cover our basic costs like rent and payroll are returned to our patients in the form of patient services and to the community in the form of charitable donations. There's no question that the cannabis industry in Oakland has contributed to the renaissance that we see happening in the city today. Just at Harborside Health Center, we've created 80 new jobs and deliver hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in revenue to the city. The city did a study of the 4 licensed medical cannabis dispensaries in Oakland and found that the crime rates in the neighborhoods that we're located in consistently dropped for each one of the 4 licensed medical cannabis dispensaries. We've improved the security in our neighborhoods, we've improved the beauty of our neighborhoods, we've brought jobs and we've brought tax revenue to the city of Oakland, and I think that Oakland has a great future with cannabis. I believe that what beer did for Milwaukee, cannabis will do for Oakland.
Oakland is a beautiful city with a bad rep. There are no-go areas for sure, and it's still in the top 10 most dangerous U.S. cities. But more and more of the town is being restored and revitalized. Old Town, Chinatown, Downtown, Uptown, North Oakland, and the Embarcadero where Jack London Square is located are all good places to visit and to live. A bridge or a boat ride across the bay from San Francisco, Oakland has better weather, more affordable housing, and a growing list of gourmet restaurants, microbreweries, and other amenities that make a city newsworthy. It also has a lively music and art scene. Positive articles in The Economist, Wall Street Journal, and New York Times have all written about the change that's taking place. The town is attracting young people, and the locals are upbeat. Being called the capital of cannabis hasn't seemed to hurt Oakland a bit, and the extra tax revenues and tourists have surely helped. One of our favorite restaurants is an old Oakland institution. The Fat Lady has served home-cooked food for 40 years. Pat Chitara and Rossi took over from her parents when they retired. It's like a club, with the same people coming year after year. We were newcomers, but quickly became friends.
We love food and we love to eat, so we want to make sure the food is wonderful. But it's not the only star here. It's reflected in the employees that we choose, the atmosphere that we present, and the stories that we share with our customers. My family came down here in 1952, and my recollections of Jack London Square at that time was it was an actual square. It had many restaurants and entertainment venues. It was only second to San Francisco. And so we've been like in a time capsule. We've been sitting here observing the ebb and flow. And we're waiting for that once great place that it used to be.
Don't you do a wine tasting here every night or something?
We do here at the Waterfront Hotel. We've got a wine tasting here at this location 5 nights a week, and we're just starting and ask some of the local wineries to start bringing their wines in.
The grapes don't care where they're crushed, they care where they're grown. And it gives us the flexibility of being able to source the best vineyards. And the great part is that we're reclaiming a lot of old buildings that otherwise would go unused.
Did you bring some wines for us today?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we did.
What have we got?
A Sauvignon Blanc, and we've got 2 different Zinfandels. One is from Napa, this is the Zydeco Zin, and then we have one from Lodi. What's your pleasure? Here's to Oakland.
Here's to Oakland and the East Bay.
Absolutely.
That's right. And the East Bay Vintners Alliance, all the wineries.
I've known Billy since the 70s when we lived in Venice Beach. He's been a casual user since his student days at Berkeley University. But he says the product has changed. It's harder to find the mellow stuff anymore.
I probably use pot 10 or 15 times a year. The way I get it now is I happen to know a couple of people that grow pot. They're kind of boutique growers. They grow very good pot. So I think there's always going to be a market for good pot, expensive, really good pot, just like there is for good wines. People that know pot well can take a smoke of it or smell it and tell you what part of California it came from. They can tell you whether it was grown indoors or outdoors. It's as complicated as wine tasting and wine, knowledge. I have some chocolate truffles here that a friend gave me. They're truffles, and the way they're made is people render the marijuana down into butter and then use the butter in the manufacture of that. You should take a tiny nibble.
Right now?
Yeah, and see how it tastes.
Will it make me high?
Probably. I mean, not very high, but take a real tiny nibble.
What's a tiny nibble? I'm kind of scared. I'll take this much.
Just a little rat bite for a taste.
A rat.
The guys that made this were world-class chefs.
Delicious.
Yeah, delicious.
Wow.
The only problem with it is it's so good, you want to eat more, and you eat another one of these, pretty soon you find yourself like having a difficult time deciding whether your legs are going to move or not if you want to walk. With medicinal marijuana, some of that is so strong that it's not functional to use it. I mean, when I use it, it's hard for me to walk, it's hard for me to think, I can't do linear thinking, because it's made for people in severe pain. It's like trying to do calculus while you're stoned on morphine, you know. But I know people, I have a friend that chain smokes pot, and he chain smokes very strong pot, and he can act perfectly normally under pressure, so it varies a lot between different people.
Honey, give me a smoke, will you?
I decided to try it myself. The first time it was fun. I took a few puffs, felt giggly and relaxed, drank some wine, ate chocolate, and had a good time. It reminded me of the old days in Venice Beach. The second time was different. When I inhaled the joint, it burned my tongue and throat and lungs. After a few minutes, I began to feel a tingling in my feet and hands. I was sitting on a hard, uncomfortable chair, but I knew that if I got up, I'd fall down. I felt like a prisoner in my own body. I finally understood the meaning of stoned. I was like a living statue, felt panic inside, but was unable to move. After an hour or so, it began to wear off. The next day, I could still feel the leftover effect, and it wasn't pleasant. Finland has an underground cannabis culture, but I've never tried it there.
No, lääkärit suhtautuu aika sillai, toiset kauhistuu ihan kauheasti ja toiset vaan ei pidä ajatuksesta. Kukaan ei oikeastaan mitenkään myönteinen ajatukselle. Meillä on niin vanhakantaiset mallit kaikkien asioiden hoidossa, että sehän on paha, sehän on niin sanotusti huume, eihän sitä voi käyttää mihinkään hyvää. Mun mielestä lääkintöihmisten kannattaisi miettiä sitä, kuinka moni näistä ikävistä kivuista kärsivät käyttää erilaisia vahvoja särkylääkkeitä ja alkoholia yhdessä ja ajautuu sitä kautta aikamoisiin hankaluuksiin. Siihen voisi olla jotain järkevämpiäkin keinoja ja mä jotenkin uskon tähän kannabikseen. Voi olla, että mä oon väärässä, mutta näin kun mä omakohtaisesti sitä asiaa oon miettinyt, niin tähän tulokseen mä oon tullut. No kyllähän tämän maailman on pakko muuttua. Ja varmaan tässäkin asiassa ennemmin tai myöhemmin. Toivottavasti ennemmin. Niin kuin sanottu, niin kuitenkin mä oon varautunut siihen asiaan sillä lailla, että mä oon hankkinut siemeniä ja meinaan rupea itse puutarhuriksi.
Conspiracy theorists have had a field day speculating on why cannabis became criminalized in the US. The reason most often heard, of course, is that after alcohol became legal in 1934, both the mafia and the federal bureaus concerned with drugs and alcohol needed to switch their focus, because when one source of revenue dried up, they needed to find a replacement. Another theory is that marijuana was so ubiquitous and cheap to grow, the pharmaceutical companies had no interest in developing it as a medication. The RAND Corporation, an independent think tank that usually follows the federal government's line, has done a study about cannabis in the US. We crossed the bridge to San Francisco to meet David Downs, a journalist who has written about the report.
Well, when I was talking to the RAND Corporation about this study, someone on the phone from a law enforcement agency publication asked, what is to stop Mexican cartels from going into business selling legal weed in California on November 3rd if Prop 19 passes? And researchers at RAND said, you know, they'd stand as much of a chance as trying to go out and selling, you know, lettuce or carrots. Namely, the one thing that cartels are good at is being criminals. And when you take the crime out of growing, you take their one competitive edge away from their market. And the interesting thing about that RAND Corporation study was it pretty much indicated that California's liberal policies toward growth and cultivation, distribution, and sales has already pushed the cartels out of California. We're one of the biggest states in the union, and the cartels aren't making their money here anymore. They can't compete on the quality and they can't compete on the price of California cannabis. The price of pot is largely high because of the risk of incarceration and enforcement that comes around it. When you look at the energy and nutrient costs it takes to grow really high quality marijuana, there's nothing there to indicate that it should cost $300 an ounce. The RAND Corporation says that the price of pot could fall anywhere from 80 to 90% under legalization as that risk gets moved out of the overall price. Along with that drop in price comes a concurrent drop, they speculate, in a whole host of social ills that come with high-priced illegal drug trade. And that includes turf wars on behalf of gangs. That includes, you know, high school dealers who are selling sacks that amount to a $30 an hour part-time job. And in many ways, it's expected to be a parallel to what happened with alcohol prohibition in this country, where the price and the enforcement led to mafia wars and mob wars and really bad, dangerous products that people were consuming high amounts of in a clandestine environment. A whole host of social ills that turned out to be much worse than the actual usage problem itself. The number one way to get someone from pot to alcohol, cocaine, crack, or harder drugs is to take away their life opportunities and their employment, which is exactly what a low-level pot bust can do. It shows up as a thing on your criminal record. You can lose your college funding over it. And the real gateway drug in our society is unemployment and ignorance. And those are two things that are largely encouraged right now by our current, pot prohibition.
We gotta make an example before boys like that contaminate all of our children.
Today, one of the reasons most often heard for the prohibition of recreational pot is that it leads to harder drugs, such as heroin and cocaine. So far, no scientific evidence has supported this claim.
It is convinced that he is hopelessly and incurably insane, a condition caused by the drug marijuana to which he was addicted.
From 1937, when marijuana was criminalized, till 2007, approximately 20 million people have been put in prison for possession of pot.
Yes, I'm guilty. I am.
Two of the volunteers for Proposition 19 were Richard's parents, Anne and Bob Lee. Conservative Republicans, Tea Party members, and fervent Catholics, both in their 80s, they began to support legalization, taxation, and regulation of cannabis after Richard had an accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down. They saw that marijuana helped to relieve his muscle spasms. We were all based at the Lake Merritt Hotel and had brunch with them.
4 years ago, when we tried to do a medical marijuana bill in the legislature in Texas, I got resolutions from 3 Republican women's clubs in favor of it.
Really? Because we always think marijuana's a liberal thing, and all the Republicans and...
Well, that is what has been promoted, but when you think about it, supporting Prop 19 supports Republican values. My real prayer, long-term goal, is to, in some way, eradicate the evil of the drug war, which has been the most racist program this country has had since slavery. When you look at the high proportion of blacks and now young Latinos whose lives have been ruined by being labeled a felon.
Because they're arrested more than whites.
Yes.
When you take the husband and father who is caught with some marijuana and send him off to prison, you've made
welfare a family.
Yeah, a neighborhood that is all of a sudden a slum neighborhood.
We talked to Terrence Hallinan, the former district attorney of San Francisco, who came out publicly and supported Proposition 19.
I am a little biased. I
grew up in San Francisco. I was a criminal defense attorney before I became a supervisor. I've known many people who use and disperse marijuana and grow marijuana, and they just don't seem like criminal people to me. I don't know why they're being treated the same as robbers and burglars and going to prison. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. I guess you could say that the worst, most dangerous aspect of marijuana is its illegality and the fact you can go to jail and even in some cases go to prison for using or growing. Or it's here. It's not a dangerous addictive drug as are many other drugs, and I think when you compare it with alcohol, it's probably a safer, more benign way of getting high. Dealing with it as a legal but controlled substance, to my mind, will save us so much money, so many problems, work for prosecutors, work for courts, jail space, and most of all, broken hearts.
The night of the election, we went to Oaksterdam University to wait for the results. The place was swarming with TV crews. But we didn't have to wait long to find out that Proposition 19 had lost by roughly 7%. Still, it won't change the fact that illegal pot is available to anyone who wants it and can afford it. In California alone, it's the biggest cash crop and amounts to around $15 billion a year. Ever since humans climbed down from the trees, every culture has had mind-altering drugs. For most people in the Western world, alcohol is the drug of choice. But other cultures have their own ways of getting high. After researching cannabis and talking to a lot of people from both sides, the case for medical marijuana seems solid. But it also seems reasonable that recreational pot should be considered as a legitimate choice. Oakland, California might just lead the way. Will Finland follow?